When my son told me that I would not be welcome at his house for Christmas because of my wheelchair, I smiled, wheeled myself away, and made one call. By New Year's Day, I had cancelled their mortgage payments. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you love the most. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Margaret, and I'm 75 years old. I live in a small house on Pine Street in Spokane, Washington, where my late husband Frank and I raised our only son, Daniel. Frank passed away 3 years ago after 50 wonderful years of marriage, leaving me alone but not broken. I'm a retired school teacher who spent 35 years at Roosevelt Elementary, and even though a car accident 2 years ago put me in this wheelchair, I've never let it slow me down. After Frank died, I poured all my love into Daniel and his family. Maybe I poured too much. You see, for the past 5 years, I've been sending Daniel $1,200 every single month to help with his mortgage payments. That's over $70,000 of my teacher's pension and Frank's life insurance money. But that wasn't all. When little Emma needed braces, I paid the $4,000 bill. When Jake wanted to play hockey, I bought all his equipment. When Daniel and his wife Claire wanted to send the kids to that fancy private school, St. Augustine Academy, I wrote a check for $15,000 a year for both children. Claire always had expensive tastes. The leather furniture in their living room? I paid for it. The family vacation to Disneyland last summer? My credit card. The down payment on their Honda minivan? My savings account. I did it all because I thought that's what grandmothers were supposed to do. I thought if I helped enough, if I gave enough, I would always have a place at their table. How wrong I was. Daniel used to be such a sweet boy. When he was little, he would sit in my lap while I read him stories. When he got older, he would help me grade papers and organize my classroom. But somewhere along the way, especially after he married Claire 5 years ago, things changed. He became distant, embarrassed, weak. Claire came from money. Her father owns 3 car dealerships in California, and she never let anyone forget it. She had opinions about everything: how people should dress, where they should live, what kind of car they should drive. And lately, I think she had opinions about mothers-in-law who use wheelchairs. The warning signs were there, but I chose to ignore them. Like when Claire started having dinner parties and somehow forgot to invite me. Or when they would post family photos on Facebook and I wasn't in a single one. Or when Emma and Jake stopped calling me grandma and started calling me Margaret because Claire said it was more mature. But I kept writing those checks every month, kept buying those Christmas presents, kept hoping that love and generosity would be enough to keep my family together. Then came that Tuesday in December, just 10 days before Christmas. I could make my famous apple pie this year, I said, settling my wheelchair closer to Claire's fancy glass coffee table. The one with the cinnamon crumble on top that Emma always loves. Remember how she used to sneak extra pieces when she thought no one was looking? I was visiting their house, the house I helped buy, planning our Christmas dinner like I had every year since they got married. The words hung in the warm air of their living room, mixing with the smell of Claire's expensive pine candles. Daniel sat across from me on their leather couch, the one I had helped them buy 2 years ago. Something in his face changed, his eyes looking away like he was scared to meet mine. "Mom," he said slowly, "we need to talk about Christmas this year." I kept smiling, even though something cold was starting to grow in my chest. "Of course, sweetheart. What about it?" Daniel looked toward the kitchen where I could hear Claire talking on the phone. Her voice was high and excited, probably talking to her mother about their fancy Christmas plans. "Well, Claire's parents are flying in from San Francisco," Daniel said, still not looking at me. "And her sister's whole family is coming too. The house is going to be really crowded." I nodded and adjusted my wheelchair a little closer to him. "That sounds wonderful, honey. I can't wait to meet Claire's parents. I've been wanting to thank them for raising such a lovely daughter." Daniel's face got red, and he started playing with his wedding ring the way he used to fidget with his toys when he was little and had done something wrong. "Mom, the thing is..." He took a deep breath. "Unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach, but I kept that smile on my face. 50 years of teaching elementary school had taught me how to smile when children said cruel things. "I see," I said quietly. "And why is that?" "It's the wheelchair," Daniel said, finally looking at me but only for a second. "Claire thinks it might make her parents uncomfortable. They are not used to being around people like you. And our dining room is pretty small." We'd have to move furniture around and it would just be awkward for everyone. People like me. The words echoed in my head. People like me who had raised him, loved him, and paid for half the things in this house. I looked around their living room. The big TV I had bought them last Christmas. The fancy carpet Claire had picked out while I wrote the check. The down payment for this whole house that had come from my savings account after Frank died. I understand, I said, and I really did understand. I understood perfectly. Maybe next year, Daniel added quickly. When things aren't so crowded. Claire came back from the kitchen then, her blonde hair perfect and her smile bright. She was wearing the diamond earrings I had given her for her birthday. "Oh, Margaret," she said in that sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "Daniel told you about Christmas, didn't he? I'm so sorry, but you know how it is with family gatherings. So complicated." She laughed like she had made a joke, but her eyes were cold as ice. I looked at my son and my daughter-in-law, these two people I had loved and supported for so many years. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes, and Claire was already checking her phone like I wasn't even there. That's when I made my decision. I wheeled myself toward their front door, past the family photos where I appeared in exactly 3 pictures out of dozens on their wall. "Where are you going, Mom?" Daniel asked. I turned around and gave them both my biggest, brightest smile. "Home, sweetheart. I have some phone calls to make." "Phone calls?" Claire asked, suddenly paying attention. "Oh yes," I said, opening their front door. The December air was cold and clean after the stuffiness of their house. "Very important phone calls. Have a wonderful Christmas with Claire's family. I'm sure it will be exactly what you deserve." I wheeled myself down their ramp, the one I had paid to have built, and didn't look back when Daniel called my name. As I got into my special car with the hand controls, I was already thinking about that first phone call I was going to make. To my bank. About those automatic payments I had been sending to Daniel's mortgage company for 5 years. By the time I got home to my little house on Pine Street, I wasn't smiling anymore. I was planning. And Margaret had always been very good at making plans. The first thing I did when I got home was make myself a cup of tea. Frank always said I thought better with a warm cup in my hands, and he was right. I sat in my wheelchair at the kitchen table, looking at the stack of Christmas cards I had already written for Daniel's family. Each one had a crisp $50 bill inside, just like every year. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. "First National Bank, this is Jessica speaking. How can I help you?" "Hello, Jessica. This is Margaret. Listen. I need to cancel some automatic payments from my checking account." "Of course, Mrs. Allison. Can you verify your account number for me?" I rattled off the numbers while staring at the family photo on my refrigerator. It was from last Christmas, me, Daniel, Claire, Emma, and Jake all smiling around their Christmas tree. The tree I had bought. "Which automatic payments would you like to cancel?" Jessica asked. "The monthly payment to First Mortgage Company for Daniel Allison." "Account number." I gave her Daniel's mortgage information that I had memoized years ago. "I see that payment here. It's for $1,200 monthly. Are you sure you want to cancel this?" "Very sure." "Okay, that's been cancelled. The last payment will go through this month, but starting in January, no more automatic payments will be sent. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I looked at my checkbook where I had written down all the other things I paid for. "Actually, yes. I also need to cancel the automatic payment to St. Augustine Academy for Emma and Jake Allison's tuition." There was a pause. "That's quite a large payment, Mrs. Allison. $2,500 per month. Are you certain?" "Completely certain." "All right, that's cancelled as well. Anything else?" I thought about Claire's credit card bill that I had been helping with, the one she used for her shopping trips and fancy dinners. One more. The monthly payment to Claire Allison's MasterCard. Account ending in 4782. Done. All 3 automatic payments have been cancelled, Mrs. Allison. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No, that's everything. Thank you, Jessica." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling lighter than I had in years. No more $4,200 going out of my account every month. That was over $50,000 a year I had been giving them. Money that could have paid for my own house repairs, my own vacations, my own life. I wheeled myself to the living room and looked at the mantelpiece where Frank's picture sat next to my teaching awards. "What do you think, Frank? Too harsh?" I could almost hear his voice. "Maggie, sometimes people need to learn the hard way that love isn't something you can take for granted." That evening, I cooked myself a real dinner for the first time in weeks. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like Frank used to love. I set the table with my good china, not the everyday dishes I usually used when I ate alone. I even lit a candle. As I ate, I thought about all the years I had spent making sure Daniel's family had everything they wanted. The sleepless nights when baby Emma was teething and I drove over at 2 a.m. to help. The time I spent hours looking for the perfect birthday presents. The way I had always made sure to ask about their day, their problems, their dreams. When was the last time any of them had asked about mine? I was just finishing my apple pie, yes, the famous one that Emma supposedly loved so much, when the phone rang. Mom. Daniel's voice sounded worried. I've been thinking about our conversation today. Maybe we can work something out for Christmas. Maybe you could come for dessert or something. I took a bite of my pie before answering. That's very kind of you, Daniel, but I think I'll make other plans. Other plans? What other plans? I'm not sure yet. But don't worry about me. I'll be just fine. There was a long pause. Are you mad at me, Mom? I looked at the photo on my side table, Daniel at age 7, missing his 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera after I had taken him to see Santa at the mall. No, sweetheart, I said gently. I'm not mad. I'm just thinking clearly for the first time in a long while. What does that mean? It means I love you, but I'm done begging for scraps of your attention. Have a good night, Daniel. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I woke up feeling more rested than I had in months. I made my coffee, read my newspaper, and was just settling in to do the crossword puzzle when the phone rang again. This time it was Claire, and she did not sound happy. Margaret, what did you do? Her voice was sharp and angry, nothing like the fake sweetness from yesterday. Good morning to you too, Claire. What did I do about what? The bank called Daniel this morning. They said his mortgage payment was declined. And the kids' school called about their tuition. What did you do? I set down my coffee cup carefully. I cancelled some automatic payments from my account. Is there a problem with that? A problem? Margaret, we depend on that money. How could you be so selfish? Selfish. That word hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Selfish, I repeated slowly. Claire, dear, I've been paying Daniel's bills for 5 years. I've given your family over $200,000 of my own money. The money Frank worked his whole life to save. The money that was supposed to be for my retirement, my medical bills, my future. And you think I'm selfish for wanting to keep some of it? That's not the point, Claire snapped. We planned our budget around that money. We have commitments. We have a lifestyle to maintain. Yes, you do. And now you get to figure out how to maintain it with your own money. You can't do this. It's almost Christmas. I looked out my window at the snow falling on Pine Street. It was peaceful and quiet, nothing like the storm brewing in Claire's voice. Claire, yesterday you told me I wasn't welcome in your home because my wheelchair would make your family uncomfortable. Today you're calling me selfish because I won't pay for the home I'm not welcome in. Do you see the problem with that? This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. It was just one Christmas dinner. No, Claire. It wasn't just one Christmas dinner. It was the moment you decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience of moving a chair or two. Well, now you get to decide if maintaining your lifestyle is worth more than having a grandmother for your children. I could hear Claire breathing hard on the other end of the phone. When she spoke again, her voice was cold as winter. Fine. Be bitter. Be alone. But don't expect us to come crawling back when you change your mind. I won't, I said calmly. Have a wonderful day, Claire. After I hung up, I sat in my wheelchair in the quiet of my little house and smiled. For the first time in years, Margaret Allison was done taking care of everyone else and ready to take care of herself. But I had a feeling Claire and Daniel weren't done with me yet. And I was absolutely right. 2 days later, I was in my garden watering my Christmas cactus when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Claire's silver BMW, the one I had helped make the down payment on. But she wasn't alone. Claire stepped out of the driver's seat wearing her expensive winter coat and dark sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. From the passenger side came a tall, thin woman with perfectly styled grey hair and a face that looked like she had been sucking on lemons. This had to be Claire's mother, Mrs. Patricia Henderson. Behind them came a man in a business suit who looked like he owned the world, Claire's father, Richard Henderson. I watched from my window as the three of them marched up to my front door like they were going into battle. When the doorbell rang, I took my time getting there. No need to rush for people who thought I was such an inconvenience. Margaret, Claire said when I opened the door. She didn't wait to be invited in. She just pushed past me into my living room, followed by her parents. We need to talk. How nice, I said, closing the door behind them. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. We're not here for coffee, Mrs. Henderson said, looking around my modest living room like it was beneath her. Her voice was crisp and cold, the kind of voice that was used to getting its way. We're here to discuss your recent tantrum. I wheeled myself to my favorite spot by the window and folded my hands in my lap. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by tantrum. Please, sit down and explain. Claire perched on the edge of my couch like she was afraid of catching something. Her parents remained standing, towering over me in what I'm sure they thought was an intimidating way. Don't play dumb, Margaret, Claire snapped. You know exactly what you did. You cut off our money supply right before Christmas like a spoiled child having a fit. Claire Elizabeth Henderson. Mrs. Henderson said sharply. Remember what we discussed in the car. Let me handle this. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Margaret, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? I asked pleasantly. Of course. You see, Claire told me about your little disappointment about Christmas dinner. And while I understand you might have hurt feelings, surely you can see our position. Mr. Henderson spoke for the first time, his voice deep and commanding. Mrs. Ellison, let's be frank. No one wants to spend their holiday worrying about accessibility issues. It's nothing personal, but wheelchairs can make social situations complicated. Surely an intelligent woman like yourself can understand that. I looked at this man who thought my wheelchair was a social complication. This man whose daughter had married my son, whose grandchildren I had helped raise and educate. Mr. Henderson, I said calmly, let me make sure I understand. You think my wheelchair is too complicated for your family to handle during Christmas dinner? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds harsh, Mrs. Henderson said with a nervous laugh. But Richard has a point. These holiday gatherings are about family harmony. And sometimes, well, certain situations can create unnecessary stress. Unnecessary stress, I repeated. Like having to move a chair so I can sit at the table. It's not just that, Claire jumped in. It's everything. The ramp, the special accommodations, the way people stare. My parents aren't used to that kind of thing. I sat quietly for a moment, looking at these three people who had come into my home to tell me that my disability was too much trouble for them to deal with. I see, I said finally. And you came here today because... Mrs. Henderson sat down on my couch and leaned forward like she was about to share a secret. Because we want to work something out, dear. Look, we understand that you've been very generous with Daniel and Claire over the years. And we appreciate that. But cutting off their support so suddenly, right before Christmas, well, that's just cruel. Cruel, I said. Yes, Mr. Henderson said, pulling out his wallet. Look, here's what we're prepared to do. We'll write you a check for $5,000 right now, as a gesture of goodwill. Consider it a Christmas bonus. In exchange, you reinstate the monthly payments to Daniel, and we'll all agree that Christmas dinner is just too complicated this year. Maybe Easter will work better. He held out his checkbook like he was offering me the crown jewels. I looked at that checkbook, then at Claire's smug face, then at Mrs. Henderson's fake smile. These people thought they could buy me off with their pocket change while telling me I was too much trouble to invite to dinner. That's very generous, I said sweetly. But I think I'll pass. Mr. Henderson's face darkened. Mrs. Ellison, I don't think you understand. Your son and his family need that money. Without it, they could lose their house. The children might have to leave their school. Is your pride really worth destroying their lives? My pride. I wheeled myself closer to him. Mr. Henderson, for 5 years I have paid $1,200 a month toward their mortgage. That's $72,000. I've paid $30,000 a year for your grandchildren's private school tuition. I've bought furniture, cars, vacations, and clothes. I've given your daughter's family over $200,000 of my retirement money because I thought that's what loving grandmothers did. Mrs. Henderson's mouth fell open slightly. And yesterday, I continued, your daughter called me selfish because I had the audacity to keep my own money after being told I was too much trouble to have at Christmas dinner. So let me ask you something, Mr. Henderson. Whose pride are we really talking about here? The room was very quiet. Outside, I could hear the wind blowing through the trees. Claire stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Mother, father, let's go. She's being impossible. Actually, Mrs. Henderson said slowly, maybe we should discuss this more. Margaret, perhaps we were a bit hasty about Christmas. I'm sure we could make arrangements. No, I said firmly. You were very clear about your feelings, Mrs. Henderson. I wouldn't want to create unnecessary stress or complications for your family. Mr. Henderson put his checkbook away. Fine. But don't come crying to us when Daniel loses everything because of your selfishness. I won't, I promised. As they headed for the door, Claire turned back. You know what, Margaret? You always acted like you were better than everyone else. Like your little teacher's salary made you some kind of saint. But look at you now. Alone in this tiny house with no one who cares about you. At least we know what you really are. And what's that, Claire? A bitter old woman in a wheelchair who has nothing left but her money. I smiled at her, the same smile I used to give students who had just answered a question incorrectly. Claire, dear, you forgot something important. What? I may be in a wheelchair, but I'm not the one begging for money. After they left, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking. These people had shown me exactly who they were, and I was finally ready to believe them. But more importantly, they had reminded me of something I had forgotten. I wasn't just Margaret the grandmother or Margaret the checkbook. I was Margaret Allison, retired teacher, widow of Frank Allison, and a woman who had spent 35 years teaching children the difference between right and wrong. And it was time for some people to learn that lesson. The next morning, I woke up to my neighbor Rosa knocking on my door. Rosa Alvarez had lived next door for 15 years, ever since she and her husband moved here from Mexico. She was about my age, with kind eyes and hands that were always busy gardening, cooking, or helping someone in the neighborhood. Margaret, she said when I opened the door, have you seen today's newspaper? She was holding the Spokane Daily Chronicle, and her face looked worried. What about it? I asked, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. Rosa handed me the paper and pointed to a story on page 3. The headline read, Local Woman Abandons Family Before Christmas. I read the article with growing disbelief. It painted me as a bitter, ungrateful woman who had cut off financial support to my struggling son's family in a fit of spite. It quoted anonymous family sources saying I was difficult, demanding, and had become increasingly hostile since my accident. The article suggested I was suffering from depression and possibly other mental issues related to my disability. Anonymous family sources, I said out loud. How convenient. Margaret, this is terrible, Rosa said, sitting down across from me at my kitchen table. Who would write such lies about you? I looked at the byline. The reporter was someone named Jennifer Walsh. The article mentioned that Daniel was a hard-working father of 2 and that Claire came from a prominent local family. Prominent local family. That would be the Hendersons, with their car dealerships and their connections. I think I know exactly who would write this, I said. Rosa reached across and squeezed my hand. The people who know you, we know this is not true. You are the kindest person on this street. But as the day went on, I could see that not everyone felt the same way Rosa did. When I went to the grocery store, people whispered and stared. Some looked at me with pity, like I was a sad old woman who had lost her mind. Others looked at me with disapproval, like I was exactly what the newspaper said, a bitter person who would hurt her own family. Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down actually crossed the street to avoid me. By evening, I was angrier than I had been in years. Not sad, not hurt, angry. These people thought they could destroy my reputation because I had refused to be their doormat anymore. They thought they could make me look like a crazy old woman and nobody would question it. They were wrong. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done since my teaching days. I made a plan. A real plan, with steps and goals and a timeline. Frank used to laugh at my planning notebooks, but they had helped me organize 35 years of successful parent-teacher conferences, school fundraisers, and classroom projects. First, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out every receipt, every bank statement, every check stub from the past 5 years. I had kept meticulous records. Old teacher habits die hard. I spread everything out on my dining room table like pieces of a puzzle. $72,000 in mortgage payments. $150,000 in private school tuition for Emma and Jake. $15,000 for Claire's credit cards. $8,000 for furniture. $5,000 for the family vacation. $3,000 for Emma's braces. $2,500 for Jake's hockey equipment. The list went on and on. The total was staggering, $267,800. Over $250,000 that I had given to Daniel and Claire's family in 5 years. I made neat piles and labeled them with sticky notes. Then I got out my camera, the digital one Emma had taught me to use, and photographed everything. If they wanted to play games with the truth, I would show them what truth really looked like. Next, I called my friend Henry Parker. Henry had been Frank's college roommate and was a retired lawyer. He and his wife lived across town, and we had dinner together once a month. "Henry, it's Margaret. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help." "Margaret? Of course. What's going on?" I told him about the newspaper article and everything that had led up to it. When I finished, Henry was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. And I'm furious. What they've done is called defamation, and it's illegal. That newspaper article is clearly based on lies designed to hurt your reputation. Can we do something about it?" "Oh, we can do more than something. Can you bring all those financial records to my office tomorrow? And bring the newspaper article too. I think it's time some people learned that Margaret Allison is not someone you mess with." After I hung up with Henry, I felt better than I had all day. But I wasn't done yet. I opened my laptop. Yes, this 75-year-old knows how to use a computer. Thank you very much. And started researching. I looked up Jennifer Walsh, the reporter who had written the article. I looked up the Henderson family and their business connections. I spent hours reading and taking notes. What I found was very interesting indeed. It seemed that Richard Henderson's car dealerships had been in some financial trouble recently. There had been complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau about dishonest sales practices. One of his lots had been investigated for selling cars with hidden flood damage. And just 6 months ago, there had been a lawsuit from customers who claimed they had been charged for services they never received. This information wasn't in any newspaper articles, but it was all there in public records if you knew where to look. And I had learned a lot about research during my teaching career. By midnight, I had a thick folder of information and a plan that would have made Frank proud. The next morning, I got dressed in my best outfit, a navy blue dress with my pearl necklace and earrings, and drove to Henry's law office downtown. "My goodness, Margaret," Henry said when he saw all my documentation. "You've been more generous than I realized. This is an incredible amount of money." "And this," I said, handing him the folder of information about the Hendersons, "might be useful too." Henry's eyebrows went up as he read through the complaints and legal troubles. "Margaret, where did you find all this?" "The internet is a wonderful thing, Henry. Amazing what you can learn when you know where to look." "Indeed it is." Henry leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know, Margaret, I think some people have seriously underestimated you." "Yes," I said, thinking about Claire calling me a bitter old woman with nothing but money. "I think they have." "Well," Henry said, opening his briefcase, "let's show them exactly how wrong they are." Little did Daniel and Claire know, but their quiet mother and grandmother was about to become their biggest problem. And Christmas was still 2 weeks away. Christmas Eve arrived grey and cold, with snow falling steadily outside my window. I had spent the morning baking cookies, not for Daniel's family, but for Rosa and Henry and Father Martinez. People who actually wanted me around. At 2 o'clock, I got dressed in my best navy blue dress and my pearl necklace. I had somewhere important to go. St. Mary's Church always held a special Christmas Eve service at 3 o'clock, followed by coffee and cookies in the fellowship hall. It was a tradition I had been part of for 25 years, and I wasn't going to let Claire's family take that away from me too. Henry had offered to pick me up, but I wanted to drive myself. I wanted to walk, or roll, in there with my head held high. The church was packed, as it always was on Christmas Eve. I wheeled myself to my usual spot in the third row, the one Frank and I had sat in for decades. People nodded and smiled at me, some more warmly than others. Word had gotten around about the newspaper article and Henry's response to it. The service was beautiful. Father Martinez spoke about Mary and Joseph finding no room at the inn, about how sometimes the people we think don't matter are the ones who matter most to God. His eyes met mine once during the sermon, and he smiled. After the service, people gathered in the fellowship hall for coffee and conversation. I was talking with Mrs. Chen about her new granddaughter when I heard familiar voices near the refreshment table. Claire and her parents had arrived. They looked elegant and expensive, as always. Mrs. Henderson wore a fur coat that probably cost more than most people's cars. Mr. Henderson had on a perfectly tailored suit. Claire was dressed in red silk and diamonds. They were holding court near the Christmas tree, talking loudly about their holiday plans and their recent trip to Europe. Several people gathered around them, impressed by their obvious wealth and sophistication. "Margaret," Mrs. Henderson called out when she spotted me. Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were cold. "How lovely to see you here." The fellowship hall got quieter as people sensed tension in the air. "Hello, Patricia," I said, wheeling myself closer. "Enjoying the service?" "Oh, it was beautiful," she gushed. "Father Martinez always gives such inspiring sermons about family and forgiveness." "Yes," I said, "especially the part about making room for people others might overlook." Claire stepped forward, her smile sharp as a knife. "Mother Margaret, how are you spending Christmas this year? Alone, I assume." The fellowship hall was almost silent now. Everyone was listening. "Actually," I said calmly, "I have wonderful plans. Rosa is cooking dinner for several of us neighbors who have become like family to each other. Henry and his wife will be there, and Father Martinez is stopping by after his evening service. It should be lovely." "How nice," Mr. Henderson said in a tone that suggested it wasn't nice at all. "Of course, it's not the same as being with your real family." "You're absolutely right," I said. "It's much better." Mrs. Henderson's smile flickered. "I'm sorry." I looked around the fellowship hall at all the faces watching us. These were my neighbors, my fellow church members, people who had known me for years. "I said it's much better," I repeated clearly. "You see, my real family, the people who will be with me tomorrow, they invited me because they want me there. Not because they need my money. Not because they feel obligated. Because they actually enjoy my company." "Now, Margaret," Mrs. Henderson said with a nervous laugh, "there's no need to be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I wheeled myself a little closer. "Patricia, 3 weeks ago, your daughter and my son told me I couldn't come to Christmas dinner because my wheelchair would make your family uncomfortable. They said I was too much trouble, too complicated to accommodate." The fellowship hall was dead silent now. "But that same week," I continued, "your family was perfectly comfortable cashing the $1,200 check I send every month for their mortgage. They were comfortable with the $2,500 a month I pay for their children's private school. They were comfortable with the $267,800 I've given them over the past 5 years." Someone in the crowd gasped. "Apparently," I said, looking directly at Claire, "wheelchairs are only complicated when you have to see them at dinner. They are not complicated at all when the person in the wheelchair is writing you checks." Claire's face had gone white, then red. "You're embarrassing yourself," she hissed. "Am I?" I asked. "Claire, which one of us tried to have lies printed in the newspaper about the other? Which one of us called the other bitter and ungrateful? Which one of us thinks a grandmother's love can be bought and sold?" Mr. Henderson stepped forward. "That's enough," he said in his commanding voice. "This is a church, not a place for airing family grievances." "You're absolutely right," Father Martinez said, appearing beside me. "This is a church. A place where we believe that every person has dignity and worth, regardless of their physical limitations. A place where we're taught to honor our fathers and mothers, not to cast them aside when they become inconvenient." The room was electric with tension. "And," Father Martinez continued, "it's also a place where truth matters. Mrs. Ellison has been a pillar of this community for decades. She's taught our children, supported our families, and given generously to anyone in need. If anyone here is embarrassing themselves, it's not her." People began to murmur agreement. I saw nods and heard whispered amens from around the room. Mrs. Henderson grabbed Claire's arm. "We should go," she said quietly. But Claire wasn't done. She turned to face the room, her voice rising. "Don't let her fool you. She's not some sweet grandmother. She's vindictive and cruel. She cut off our support right before Christmas, right when our children needed it most." "Your children," I said quietly, "never needed my money, Claire. You did. Your children needed a grandmother who loved them. But apparently, that wasn't convenient enough for your family's image." The fellowship hall erupted in whispers and conversations. People were looking at the Henderson family with new eyes, and not friendly ones. Daniel, who had been silent through this entire exchange, finally spoke. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible, "can we talk privately?" I looked at my son, this man who had once been my whole world, who had let his wife's family convince him that his mother was an embarrassment. "Of course, Daniel," I said. "But not today. Today is Christmas Eve, and I have plans with people who actually want to spend it with me." As I wheeled myself toward the door, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. People reached out to touch my shoulder, to whisper words of support, to smile at me with new respect. Behind me, I could hear the Henderson family making hurried excuses and leaving as quickly as possible. Outside, the snow was still falling, but I felt warmer than I had in years. Christmas morning came bright and clear. I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. No rushing around trying to get to someone else's house early to help with cooking. No worrying about whether my wheelchair would fit at their table. No walking on eggshells around people who saw me as a burden. Just peace. I made myself coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow sparkle in the morning sun. At 10 o'clock, Rosa was coming over to start cooking our Christmas dinner. Henry and his wife Dorothy would arrive at noon, and Father Martinez would join us after his morning service. A small group, but people who genuinely wanted to be there. At 9:15, my phone started ringing. I looked at the caller ID. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Daniel. I let that one go too. By 9:30, my phone had rung 6 times. All Daniel. I turned the ringer off and went to get dressed for the day. When Rosa arrived with bags of groceries and her famous homemade tamales, she was grinning from ear to ear. Margaret, have you seen today's newspaper? She handed me the Spokane Daily Chronicle, and there on page 2 was a headline that made me smile. Correction and apology. The article was everything Henry had demanded. It stated that the previous story about me had been based on incomplete and biased information. It clarified that I was a respected retired educator and generous community member who has made significant financial contributions to family members over many years. It even mentioned my donations to local schools and charities. Most importantly, it apologized for any damage to Mrs. Allison's reputation caused by the inaccurate reporting. Henry works fast, I said. That's not all, Rosa said, pulling ingredients out of her bags. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson works at the bank. She said Richard Henderson came in yesterday afternoon looking very upset, asking about some kind of business loan that got called in early. Really? And my cousin Maria works at the dealership downtown, not Henderson's, the other one. She said people have been talking about those complaints against Henderson Motors. Apparently, some customers are demanding refunds, and there might be more lawsuits coming. I felt a small flutter of satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the whole mess. Rosa and I spent the morning cooking and talking about happier things. But every few minutes, I noticed the light on my phone blinking. More missed calls. When Henry and Dorothy arrived at noon, Henry was chuckling about something. Margaret, he said, helping Dorothy out of her coat. You'll never guess who called my office this morning. Who? Richard Henderson. Wanted to know if there was any way to work things out between our families. Apparently, the newspaper retraction and the renewed interest in his business practices have made him very eager to make peace. Dorothy shook her head. Some people only want to be nice when they need something. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him to have his son-in-law call you directly if he wants to apologize. Like a grown man should. By the time Father Martinez arrived at 2 o'clock, my phone showed 23 missed calls. 18 of them were from Daniel. The others were from Claire and her parents. Someone's been trying to reach you, Father Martinez observed, seeing me check my phone. Yes, they have. But today is Christmas, and I'm spending it with people I choose to be with. Our dinner was wonderful. Rosa's tamales, Dorothy's green bean casserole, my apple pie, and Father Martinez's stories about Christmas services gone wrong had us all laughing until our sides hurt. We talked about books and travel and memories. No one asked me for money. No one treated me like I was fragile or pitiable. No one acted like my wheelchair was an inconvenience. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. After everyone left that evening, I finally listened to my voicemails. The first few from Daniel were almost casual. Hi Mom, just calling to wish you Merry Christmas. Call me back. But as the day went on, his messages got more desperate. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. Mom, Claire told me what happened at church yesterday. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mom, I'm sorry about Christmas dinner. Maybe we can work something out for New Year's. And finally, the last message, left at 8:30 that evening. Mom, I know you're angry, and I know I messed up. Please call me back. I love you. The next morning, December 26th, brought more missed calls and a surprise visitor. I was reading in my living room when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Daniel walking up to my front door, alone this time. He looked terrible, unshaven, his hair messy, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. When I opened the door, he just stood there for a moment, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I come in, Mom?" I moved back and let him enter. He sat heavily on my couch, the same couch where I had explained my financial situation to Henry just days earlier. "Mom, He stopped and put his head in his hands. "I don't even know where to start." "Start wherever you want, Daniel." "I'm sorry." The words came out broken, like they hurt to say. "I'm so sorry for what I said, what I did, how I treated you. There's no excuse." I waited. Claire's parents, they made it sound like having you at Christmas would be this huge production, this complicated thing that would ruin everyone's good time. And I was weak. I listened to them instead of standing up for you. "Yes, you were weak," I said quietly. "And yes, you did listen to them." Daniel looked up at me, surprised by my directness. "But Daniel," I continued, "that's not really the problem." "It's not." "No. The problem is that you've been taking my money for 5 years while letting your wife and her family treat me like I was something to be ashamed of. The problem is that you never once stood up for me, never once made me feel welcome in your home, never once acted like having me as your mother was anything but a burden." Daniel's face crumpled. I know I was terrible. "Daniel, I didn't stop giving you money because I was angry about one Christmas dinner. I stopped because I finally realized that you and Claire don't love me. You love what I can do for you. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, most people still enjoying their Christmas break. "What can I do?" Daniel finally asked. "How can I fix this?" "I don't know that you can," I said honestly. "Daniel, for 5 years I've been buying your love with money, and for 5 years you've been selling it. That's not a relationship. That's a transaction. But I do love you, Mom. I really do." "Do you?" "Daniel, when was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my day, my health, my feelings? When was the last time you invited me to dinner without it being a holiday obligation?" Daniel stared at the floor, unable to answer. "I thought so," I said. Can I try? To do better, I mean." I looked at this man who had once been the center of my world, who I had raised and loved and sacrificed for. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to forgive him and go back to the way things were. But I was done being Margaret the pushover. "Daniel, I will always love you. You're my son. But love and respect are not the same thing. If you want a relationship with me, a real relationship, then you need to earn back my respect. And that's going to take time." "How long?" "I don't know. Maybe a long time. Maybe forever. That's up to you." Daniel stayed for another hour, and we talked more honestly than we had in years. When he left, he didn't ask for money. He didn't make promises about how things would be different. He just hugged me and said he would call in a few days. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, Margaret wasn't going to wait by the phone, hoping for scraps of attention from people who didn't deserve her love. I had finally learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. And I wasn't lonely anymore. 3 months later, I was sitting in my garden on a warm March afternoon, watching my neighbor Henry build a raised flower bed that would be easier for me to tend from my wheelchair. Rosa was inside making lunch for all of us, and Dorothy was helping me plan the menu for Easter dinner, our Easter dinner, the one we would share as chosen family. My phone rang, and I saw Daniel's name on the screen. He had been calling once a week since Christmas, short conversations where he asked about my day and told me about Emma's science project or Jake's baseball practice. No requests for money. No mentions of Claire's complaints. Just talking. "Hi, Daniel." "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "I'm good. Henry's building me a flower garden I can reach from my chair, and Rosa's teaching me to make tamales." "That sounds wonderful." There was a pause. "Mom, I was wondering, would you like to have lunch sometime? Just the two of us." I considered this. Wherever you'd like. Maybe that little cafe on Division Street you used to take me to when I was a kid. Miller's Diner. That's the one. I smiled, remembering Daniel as a 7-year-old, his face covered in chocolate from their famous pie. "I'd like that." "Really? Really? But Daniel, I want you to understand something. This lunch isn't about going back to the way things were. It's about seeing if we can build something new. Something better. I understand. And Mom, I'm paying for lunch. After we hung up, I sat in my garden thinking about forgiveness and second chances. I had forgiven Daniel, truly forgiven him. But forgiveness didn't mean pretending the past hadn't happened. It meant being willing to see if he could become the man I had once hoped he would be. Father Martinez had helped me understand the difference during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Forgiveness, he had said, is not about forgetting or excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing yourself from bitterness and giving the other person a chance to do better. But they have to earn that chance. My new life was fuller than my old one in ways I had never expected. Rosa and I had become best friends, sharing meals and stories and laughter almost every day. Henry had become my legal advisor and fix-it man. But more than that, he had become the brother I'd never had. Dorothy brought me books from the library and taught me to knit. Father Martinez and I had started a support group at the church for people dealing with family difficulties. I had also started volunteering at the elementary school again, reading to children and helping with their writing projects. The kids didn't see my wheelchair as a problem. They just saw Mrs. Allison, who brought interesting books and always had time to listen to their stories. Most surprisingly, I had started dating. Well, sort of. George Peterson was a widower from my church who had asked me to dinner twice now. He was kind and funny, and he had never once acted like my wheelchair was anything but a part of me, like my grey hair or my love of mystery novels. We were taking things very slowly, but for the first time in years, I felt like Margaret the woman, not just Margaret the grandmother or Margaret the helper. Emma called me one Thursday evening in April, something she hadn't done since before Christmas. Grandma Margaret. Her voice was tentative. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you ever going to forgive Dad? I was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer honestly but kindly. Emma, I have forgiven your father. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. I don't understand. Well, imagine if your best friend borrowed your favorite book and then lost it, and then lied about losing it. You might forgive her because you love her, but you probably wouldn't lend her your favorite things anymore, would you? No, I guess not. It's like that with grown-ups too. Your father hurt my feelings very badly, and even though I forgive him, I need to see that he's really changed before I can trust him the way I used to. He talks about you a lot, Emma said quietly. He says he misses you. I miss him too, sweetheart. And maybe, if he keeps working at being a better son, we can have a good relationship again someday. What about Mom? That was harder to answer. Claire had never called, never apologized, never acknowledged that she had done anything wrong. From what Daniel told me, she was angry that the Henderson family's reputation had been damaged and blamed me for their social and financial troubles. I don't know about your mother, Emma. That's up to her. After Emma hung up, I thought about Claire and felt something I hadn't expected, pity. She was so worried about appearances and social status that she couldn't see the real damage she was doing to her own family. Her children were growing up watching their mother treat their grandmother like an embarrassment. What kind of lesson was that? But that was Claire's choice to make. I was done trying to fix other people's problems. In May, I made a decision that surprised even me. I sold my house. Not because I couldn't take care of it, but because I wanted something new. Something that reflected who I was becoming, not who I had been. I bought a smaller house just 3 blocks away, one with a beautiful garden and a ramp that didn't look like a medical device but like part of the architecture. Rosa and Henry helped me move, and we had a housewarming party that filled my new home with laughter and music and the smell of Rosa's cooking. Daniel came to the party alone, and spent 2 hours helping me arrange my books and listening to Rosa's stories about her grandchildren in Mexico. He didn't ask why I had moved without telling him. He didn't complain that my new house was smaller and had fewer guest rooms. He just helped and talked and seemed genuinely happy to be there. Progress. Christmas came again, almost a year after the Christmas that had changed everything. This time, there was no question about where I would spend it or who would be there. Rosa, Henry and Dorothy, Father Martinez, George, and several other friends would gather at my new house for what had become our traditional celebration. 2 weeks before Christmas, Daniel called with a question I had been expecting. Mom, I know you have plans for Christmas, but I was wondering, could Emma and Jake come visit you for an hour or two? They miss you, and I think it would mean a lot to them. What about Claire? I asked. Claire won't be coming. Because she doesn't want to, or because you're not inviting her? There was a long pause. Because I'm not inviting her. Mom, I can't make Claire respect you, but I can make sure she doesn't disrespect you in front of my children anymore. I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of an old hurt I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Yes, I said. Emma and Jake can come. But Daniel, they're coming to my house, with my friends, to celebrate the way we celebrate. No complaints about the food or the decorations or the wheelchair accessibility. Understood. Understood. On Christmas Day, Emma and Jake arrived with their father, carrying carefully wrapped presents they had made themselves. Emma had written me a story about a brave grandmother who lived in a magical garden. Jake had built me a bird feeder shaped like a schoolhouse. They fit right in with my chosen family, laughing at Henry's jokes, helping Rosa serve dinner, and listening with wide eyes to Father Martinez's stories about Christmas traditions around the world. When it was time for them to leave, Emma hugged me tightly. "Grandma Margaret," she whispered, "I like your new friends." "I like them too, sweetheart. Will you teach me to make tamales like Rosa does?" "Of course. You can come over next Saturday if your father says it's okay." As I watched Daniel drive away with my grandchildren, I realized something remarkable had happened over the past year. I had stopped trying to force people to love me and had instead surrounded myself with people who already did. The 18 missed calls that had once seemed so desperate now seemed like exactly what they were. The sound of people finally realizing what they had lost. But more importantly, they were the sound of Margaret Alyson finally understanding what she was worth. I was worth respect. I was worth genuine affection. I was worth more than being someone's secret shame or convenient ATM. And I was never, ever going to settle for less than that again. As I sat in my wheelchair in my beautiful new living room, surrounded by the remnants of a perfect Christmas with people who loved me exactly as I was, I smiled and whispered a thank you to Frank. He had been right all along. I was the strongest person he knew. I just had to remember it myself. True family isn't defined by blood or appearances, but by respect and love. Disability doesn't diminish worth. It reveals the strength of those who can see beyond it. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve.